Well, the women remembered. Their terror subsided, and they returned to the 11 to tell them the good news. When the gospel writers speak of the 12, and they speak of Jesus' disciples, oftentimes they will say 3 names. They will say, now Jesus took Peter, James, and John. The other disciples didn't go. Or, now, Peter, James, and John, and the other disciples were with Jesus. Here Luke writes, now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and the other women. Makes it sound like a small battalion of women witnesses, doesn't it? They told what they had seen to the apostles. And here comes my very favorite line of the whole story. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. Well, excuse me. When Peter takes off at a dead run to see for himself what has gone on at the tomb, then I think the whole notion of this being an idle tale goes right out the window. Come on now. If your neighbor told you that she saw Sasquatch milling about in your backyard, you might think it ridiculous. You might think it an idle tale. But I bet you dollars to donuts, you would sneak out there with a flashlight when no one was looking to see for yourself. And even if you didn't see the Sasquatch, you would keep half an eye peeled at all times just in case there was something out there. What would it take to convince you that the Sasquatch was really in your backyard? On this morning, none of the other disciples were convinced of Jesus' resurrection. What would it take to convince them? They were not convinced based on what the women reported to them. Luke is sure to tell us that the women told what they had seen and they had heard to the 11 and all the rest. In other words, it's not just 11. It attests to the fact that those who were in the company of Jesus when he came to Jerusalem were considerably more than 20 or 21. Luke makes it very clear that the empty tomb did not lead the disciples of Jesus or those designated apostles to what you might call the Easter faith. The women saw what they saw and knew what they knew, but the others would need their own experience. Well, isn't that how it always is? I can stand here and I can preach my experiences to you. I can tell you about everything I know until I turn blue. But each and every one of you needs to have your own revelatory experience where this tale becomes real for you. Come on. We all know we are running beside Peter to the tomb so that we can see for ourselves that the tomb is indeed, as the women said, empty. Every one of you would run with Peter to see for yourselves. And at that, when you got there, would only believe it to be empty. After all, the fact is that it is empty doesn't tell us anything, really, other than the body's gone. Anybody could have taken it. The women themselves might have carried it off. They could have made up the story about the men in dazzling clothes, for all we know. But even with all that kind of doubtful thinking, we stand with Peter at the tomb with half an eye peeled. What is Peter thinking? Just a few verses ago, Peter was denying that he even knew Jesus. "Simon, Simon," said Jesus, "listen, Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail. I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you have denied me 3 times that you know me." Has Jesus come back to haunt him? Are these the words that are running through Peter's mind as he runs to see for himself the empty tomb? Luke tells us that Peter was amazed at what had happened. I wonder, did he return to all of the rest and corroborate the story related by the women? Interestingly enough, Luke does tell us that later in chapter 24, that Simon did see the risen Christ. That the risen Christ did appear to him on that very day. Oh, how I wish we had that story. But we have only hearsay. What do you suppose it is about us humans that makes us so determined to want to see the Jesus that is outside ourselves in order to believe that his life, his death, his final resurrection was miraculous? These, after all, are the things of God. We need to see ourselves, Jesus. We need to see ourselves, the risen one. Maybe that is why people look for his visage or his likeness and can find it in a piece of toast, or on a refrigerator door or aluminum siding. Maybe that is what we doubtful humans need in order for us to truly connect with the author of the resurrection. It was such a fabulous idea, don't you think? Certainly one of God's best and most dramatic. But will we believe it? Will we embrace it? Can we take it on hearsay? Or do we have to see it with our own eyes? If we won't believe this hearsay, then we must be content to go through the motions, celebrating a mythical story. It makes for a nice outing on Easter Sunday anyway. Had we been there, surely we would have recorded the event on our cell phones, or brought our video cameras. Or we could have recruited some of those ghost chaser types who have all that fancy ghost recording equipment and night vision goggles and cameras. Surely they would have caught the whole thing for us on tape, and we could play it over and over and over again until we believed it. This morning, Luke tells us that only the women believed that the resurrection had happened, and the rest would need more to be convinced.